We are going to be talking with Pete Konczal. He's a cinematographer of film, TV, music videos, commercials. First of all, thank you so much for doing this because, like I said at the beginning when I first logged on, this is the first time that I've ever done a Facebook Live, that I've hosted a Facebook Live. I think this is your first time on a Facebook Live.
Yeah, it is.
Okay, great. So I'm learning as we go. Now, if you guys have questions, please do ask it. We're going to keep talking, but I very much want questions from the audience. So throw them in there. We will answer them. We'll interrupt the flow of everything to get your questions on. So first thing is first, Pete, I want you to introduce yourself so that people know who you are, and we'll get the ball rolling that way. So tell us, who are you?
Oh, okay, cool. I'm Pete Konczal. I'm a cinematographer and currently working on season 4 of Fargo with Dana Gonzalez, who's awesome, an amazing DP and great guy. And you came out to visit us, which is kind of great because you got to see us both in action because Dana was actually directing. So
oh, I'm so glad you said that because as far as I knew, I wasn't supposed to say that, but now the cat's out of the bag. So
I think it's I think it's okay to say that.
It's your fault now if I get in trouble. So yes, in January, I went to Chicago, visited the set, and I got to see Pete working with Dana Gonzalez as director. It was absolutely incredible. I had so much fun on set watching you guys work, and both of you were going to be on Go Creative Show to talk about Fargo in April when the episodes start airing.
Yeah, which we'll both very much look forward to that. And, it's always an honor to be invited by somebody as talented as Dana, who's a fellow cinematographer. So it was just an absolute joy to work with him. I mean, he's just, he has a brilliant mind for breaking down a scene and staging it. And also working with the actors, and he just just understands story and how to create drama and suspense, and he was really great with me. I mean, I did a lot of research. I watched the first 2 episodes where he was the DP on them, and I really studied them. And he gave me this great book by this photographer, Saul Leiter. If you're not familiar with his work, it's really fantastic, and that became a real.
Do you remember the name of it? I'll take a note of it so people can check it out.
It'll come to me at some point.
Okay.
But yeah, I'm sure I'll remember in a few minutes. But he gave me, and then he had just, I remember the first thing I thought was like, man, I'm just blown away by the amount of research that this guy's done, and how much he's really tried to craft a look for the show, even going as far as to just building this look that feels like camera that resembles Ektachrome, and it was cool. I mean, the whole thing got me way out of my comfort zone, which was a lot of fun. Because if you're working with a curve, it's almost like working with like a film stock, and it was like reversal film stock, and we're so used to all of us like the digital cameras and the dynamic range and all this stuff, and Dana's like, he's like, bro, you're going to have to think a little differently, man, because, this is, we've created this curve, and in the bottom of the curve, if you're, just familiar with color grading, he just took the low end and just like kind of made this like, just crushed it at the bottom and flattened it out. So it was, we had a situation where the blacks are very inky and the highlights are kind of raised, and it was it was really fun to work and kind of have to think differently. And at the same time, Dana also said, look, I know, I kind of shadowed him a little bit to watch the way he worked, but then he was also like, I want you to, just bring what you do. I want you to, I want you to bring your lighting and your feel to it. So it was just, it's been a blast of a collaboration.
Now, for people just joining, we've got Pete Konczal. He's a cinematographer. He's currently working on season 4 of Fargo, and the person he's referring to is Dana Gonzalez, who's the director of photography for Fargo, but also has directed a couple episodes that Pete has shot. Jeremy, I see your question, and we absolutely will get to it, but I just want to continue this conversation about Fargo for a minute. Yeah. I think something that a lot of people don't realize with Fargo and with Dana Gonzalez is that he's secretive about his filters and what he uses. Yeah. And I knew that because when I interviewed him a couple years back for Fargo, I had asked him, and he respectfully declined to get into it. And even on set, I saw that his filter box, the brand names are all crossed off. Like everything is hidden. Like he has a secret sauce when it comes to filtration.
He does.
Now, obviously, I'm certainly not going to ask you to give away your filter package for Fargo, but I am curious on just your approach to using filtration in your own work. Are you a big advocate for filters?
Yeah, I am. Especially, I mean, I've always been interested in filters. I remember, I feel like when I first started shooting, I really became fond of like tobacco filters, and I remember like hearing of Phil Abraham using them on The Sopranos, and I was like, oh, there's something going on there, and I always, something that's affecting the way, the colors being represented by film and even the contrast. So I remember like, I was like, I really got into using like color filters, and I saw that, it really started affecting the dynamic range, and, you might get a deeper, richer image with them, or you could potentially get like a lower con image depending on what you used. And I always just personally, and this is something where Dana and I really connected, I just always liked using filters and just trying to knock the camera, and especially with digital now, right, where things are so sharp, that I like putting stuff in front of the lens and just trying to get it out of the norm. And that's something that Dana and I really share.
Talk to us about the look of Fargo. It takes place, I mean, every season of Fargo is a little bit different.
Right.
And especially in this season, season 4, it doesn't really reflect the look of the original movie. We've sort of moved on from that into a different look. Tell us, the time period, the inspiration. What does the new season of Fargo look like?
Yeah, I mean, it really has a much more aged look, and it's supposed to, obviously it wants to feel period, and it very much does. And again, Dana just had this really deep research and photos, and what he had found is he had really liked the idea of using color and high contrast, and in combination with some filters that would give us a warming effect as well. And so it really, I mean, I feel like in a way it's the opposite of so much of the looks that are happening now, where everything is, people are shooting so low con and really using the sensor and shooting, in the dark, and like, oh, I can use such low light because I'm shooting in a situation that I can just have a couple of fluorescent lights on. And, he really took things a different way, and but really the best thing example I could use is it's like using reversal stock. If you ever shot that, if you ever shot Ektachrome, and where it's really, you don't have a ton of dynamic range. I mean, it's in the negative, right? I mean, we're shooting raw, but we really committed to it. We really committed to this idea that, we're gonna shoot as if it was a stock, like a period stock, and we're gonna have to live and die by this, like the choices we make, and not get bailed out later. We're gonna embrace having very rich blacks and having strong highlights. And then Dana also had this brilliant idea of with this look and it being a more saturated look of just using specific colors. So you'll notice, when the series airs, and there's a trailer. There's a teaser out for it. You can really see for the first 2 episodes that Dana shot that. And
it looks amazing. And you've actually been posting shots from Fargo on your Instagram too. So it's like, I am so excited to see this one.
Yeah, I just posted. What I try to do is I don't want to give anything away, so I try to post like behind the scenes stuff. So I think I posted a picture of a guy smoking a cigarette in the location that you were at, that you came to visit us at. But yeah, I mean, it's been a big shift, and again, made me get out of my comfort zone and have to think more like I was lighting for film with a film stock with very little latitude. And I got to tell you, it's been a blast.
Well, we've got a question about a filter here. I'm going to put it up on the screen. This person wants to know about haze. I didn't know you were the maestro of atmosphere.
Yeah, I'm an atmosphere junkie. You could probably see it in a lot of my work. The machine I've used my whole career is the DF50. I always just consider it to be the best haze machine. When I came into the show, you can't use it as much anymore because I suppose there's new standards, and there's people feel there's chemicals in that you can't use. So So the special effects team on this show is using a mix of filters, of diffusion on set, of atmosphere, that's haze, and depending on the scenes, mixing them, together to get a desired effect. And I have a joke with a friend where we feel like somebody should come up with a company called Atmos Inc. because it's really hard to maintain atmosphere. And you'll notice in Fargo this season, it's in my work too, and Dana and I again connect on this. It's really a big part of what we do. It just with HD and you're going to get like an extra layer and a dimension to your image when you have atmosphere. But again, yeah, you'll kind of see it all over my work, and I'm a total junkie for it.
We're talking with Pete Konczal, currently working on Fargo. I wanted to ask you about your relationship with Dana Gonzalez by way of being the director of photography on his episode. So Dana is the director of photography for the most part of the entire season and the entire series.
Yeah.
You come on to direct the photography of his episodes.
Yeah.
What is it like working with a director who is also a cinematographer? Do you have freedom to kind of be creative?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I mean, first off, I think there's this myth in television of like you go into a show and like, oh, the show has its look and you're just going to do that, right? And it's just these are the lights we use. And the very first day I shot with Dana, again, he was like, look, I mean, I want you to do your thing. I want you to, you and I. And I know, and when I shadowed him and watched the way he lit. We actually had this discussion today, and we like very different, and yet we're both a huge fan of each other's work. So it was great, and I remember like the first scene we did. I looked over these ceiling pieces, and I looked at Mike Moyer, who's our amazing gaffer who you interviewed. Moish, who's incredible. I mean, a DP's dream to work with a guy that loves light and is as talented as him. And Art Bartel's our amazing key grip. And I looked at the ceiling pieces, and I was like, wow, let's take a few of those pieces out and let's put muslin in there. And I want to, and we'll light from above that, and we'll mix that with light that's coming through the windows, and just create like a base of light. Like I had this feeling going into Fargo. And this is the challenge, because since the light's so heavy, that it's always tempting to just point a light at someone to make sure you're getting your exposure right and getting enough, with the contrast. But I still wanted to bring, my feeling of softer light into this world. And Dana was just so encouraging. He's like, look, I want you to do your thing. And it was great. And so he gave me really just a lot of free reign, and we would discuss things, and we would comment on them together. But he really let me go, and I'm so grateful for him for that. I mean, I think it shows what a great artist he is. We also had this conversation like when cinematographers, you really get to a point in your career like you're not competitive. I mean, you look at your peers and the things that they're doing, and you're like, wow, I just want to talk to this guy. I'd love to be on this set. I'd love to see what he does. And he and I both love that. So yes, I was able to be very creative.
So we encourage you guys to ask your questions, and they'll pop up here on my screen. I'll throw them over to Pete. So please do, if you have questions for Pete, ask them here. When I was on the Fargo set earlier this year in January, something that shocked me the most was how quickly you guys moved. Like, I had in my mind this vision of a lot of sitting around, kind of casual, waiting forever for, the grips to move things here and there. You were outside, inside, doing a whole bunch of stuff, and it was moving so fast. And something else that was surprising is that Dana was surprisingly conservative with the amount of takes he got. Like, talk to me about your workflow during the day.
Yeah, I mean, obviously one of the greatest things that Dana and I were able to do in advance was to prep for 3 weeks, I want to
quickly just give a shout out to Tim Ives, director of photography of Stranger Things. He says here that he's a fan of yours, but he has to jump. Nice to hear from you. All the best, Tim. Tim, we want you on one of these interviews, so we're going to have to set it up. We're all at home now, not being able to do anything, so now's the time. All right, sorry.
I love Tim's work, man. Yeah. we spent a lot of time prepping, and you know, I mean, it sounds like a cliche, but you really want to get as much work as you can, you know, done beforehand, so that when you're walking on set, you just really have a great understanding of it. That being said, it's TV, and you're going to have a lot of page counts and a lot of areas to cover, and I think we both have a lot of energy. So, you know, there's a plan, but sometimes like, okay, we have to have this thing that we're lighting outside, and then, you know, now we're going inside, and like we have our lights waiting there, and then you're kind of running all over the place, and you can't do it without a great crew, and you know, we really had an army of great guys. Again, you know, like with Moish and with Art Bartels, a key grip. Chris Wittenborn, my first AC, is absolutely brilliant as well, and all these guys are constantly problem solving with you. And then you have a rigging crew. So, you know, the location that you visited us with is a location that's been shot in the show before, but you're still going to go back and scout that location for every episode. And then based on my conversations with Dana, you know, and I talked with Moish and Art, we came up with a plan to, you know, put lights in certain places to make our day easier. And those things are waiting for you, you know, with a great crew. A great rigging crew goes in, and then you're just going in and you're tweaking at that point. So it seems kind of mad, and you're running around all the time because you're really trying to get the page count and be honest, you know, to the look of the show and achieve great things. But if you have an army of just great guys with you, you feel like you can do anything.
We have a question from Kid Kafka asking, it says, Pete, are you still shooting with Alexa?
Yes. Yeah. So, yes, we're still shooting with Alexa, and that's my friend Chris Steifel, I think. He's a great director, great commercial director. We're shooting with the Alexa LF on this, and it's my first narrative project with the large format. I've always just been more of a fan of in digital of the Alexa. I had done a project with the Sony Venice prior to this, and I see people that get great images out of that camera, but and it's a large format sensor, but the Alexa just has a magic to me that's unmatched in any digital format.
What did you do before with the LF?
I just shot some commercials with the LF before, and I like it, and it's, you know, it's they've obviously come up with the mini LF, the mini LF has been a game changer, because when they released the LF, it was still a big camera, and, you know, a lot of large format glass was coming out. And look, I mean, getting back to the filter side of this too, this is, you know, when you take that much more resolution, and you take a lot of these new large format lenses, which are very sharp, you know, you're going to want to use a lot of atmosphere, and you're going to want to use filtration, you know, be it, you know, for me, diffusion filters, and that, to kind of beat some of that sharpness back. But what you're gaining is, you know, less depth of field, and being able to get on wider lenses and roll off the focus. And I don't know, I think the LF for me is the new standard. Just at least personally, I think it's an incredible camera.
Well, let's talk about those lenses. We have a question here for you to discuss your lens package. I'm interested in that for sure, especially now knowing that you're shooting this on the Alexa LF. And again, we're talking about Fargo season 4, Pete Konczal, one of the cinematographers on the series. So yeah, talk to us about your lens package.
Yeah, so Dana was able to secure these Zeiss Radiance lenses, which I think we had, you know, at least at the time of the beginning of the shoot, probably the only 2 sets that exist. So there was a lot of feedback that came back from the Zeiss Supreme Primes, which it's beautiful glass, but that it's very sharp. So Zeiss made a set of lenses. They changed the coating a bit and the optics, and it's a softer look. Not anamorphic, but has some of the, you know, the qualities with the roll off of focus and the way they flare and soft, and it's a warmer, to me, it's a warmer look as well. And the lenses, I mean, yeah, Dana and I have absolutely loved this glass. It's the combination of those Radiance lenses with this sensor, it is definitely some magic happening.
Can you explain to us the difference between that LF sensor and what people might be more familiar with, you know, a 35 crop. They use Alexa Minis. They're wondering, what is the benefit of that LF? What am I actually going to get from it?
It's a great question. I mean, you know,
and so LF here on the Alexa, when we say Alexa LF, it's large format.
Large format. Yeah, so it's essentially, yeah. Go ahead.
And they also now more recently have the LF Mini. So we're talking about that difference between kind of the Alexa Minis that people still use too, and are wildly successful. But now there's a lot of interest on the LF. So talk to us about the difference and what you get extra with that LF.
Right. Yeah. So the LF, I mean, you know, with the resolution, again, since it's acting like a large format still camera, I mean, all the principles are the same. You're able to roll off your focus faster, and that was always the big appeal of anamorphic, right? That you could shoot wider lenses and have this really sexy roll off of focus, so that everything wasn't necessarily like deep focus once you got on a wide lens. And then obviously the resolution, there's, you know, you have more resolution. So I think that, you know, there's more resolving power and just in terms of your color rendition and your overall image. What we've been using forever is just, you know, cameras that are based on a super 35 millimeter size and sensor. And you know, obviously it's less resolution, and it's, you're having more depth of field, and yeah, they're very, very different image qualities, and you could really just take the same principles of still photography and the medium format cameras and carry them across to the LF.
Mike Moyer, Moish, I love your question. I definitely want to talk about camera support, but I do think it's important to kind of address, you know, the elephant in the room here. Jeremy, one of the stars of House of Cards, which is also one of the TV shows that you have.
It's a great actor.
You have filmed, yes. I want to bring up his question here because the production industry has been hit extremely hard.
Yeah.
With COVID-19. I mean, the whole world has, obviously, but this interview is about production. Jeremy wants to know, what are folks on the inside saying about coming back to work? This is a huge question, and it seems like every day it's changing, but what is your perspective on this? And I know Fargo was shut down with just a couple more shooting days to go, so I'd like to hear your thoughts on this.
That's it's a great question. You know, it's funny too, because I was on set with Dana. You know, I was scouting a location that he was shooting. He was doing some reshoots with Noah Hawley at the time, that, you know, the show's creator and the main director. And you know, it's funny. It was a Thursday. You know, I think, you know, the week we shut down, and everybody was feeling, everybody's kind of like on everybody's phone. It was like, oh, NBA is suspending the season, NHL is suspending the season, MLB is going to push the start. It was like all this stuff was coming in, and everybody was just getting really nervous, you know. So first off, that feeling on set was like, and then you start, like, someone starts coughing or like scratch, you know, their throat's scratchy, or they sneeze, and then everyone's like, oh, you know, and it was amazing. I've never been on anything where it felt so surreal, where you just kind of don't know, you know, there's this invisible thing out there. So, you know, so obviously we all, you know, all production decided to stop. And I talked to one of the showrunners from Fargo yesterday. We had a great conversation, and again, like, this is all we can do is speculate. But, you know, his perspective was that a lot of the studios want to try to get back up by early June. Like, that's in talking to health officials and sort of looking at the situation at this point, that's what they're thinking. That's what they're hoping for. Again, it's just speculative, but you know, I talked to my agents as well, who are very optimistic. My agents at Artistry, and one of my agents, Greg D'Alessandro in particular, we had a great discussion, and, you know, they're thinking of, he's saying, look, and they're starting to talk in other parts of the world about production starting again. So parts of Asia where they've been able to control things, they're already starting to talk about jobs now and getting production back. I mean, obviously there's certain things we know. We can look at South Korea, and some of the countries that have handled it well, and what they've done with the testing, and you know, really trying to come up with some system, you know, whatever it may be, you know, getting over the height or the curve, and, you know, flattening the curve, and then whether, you know, people are going to get tested before they go back into the workforce, or if it's limiting the limiting the population that's more at risk if this is still hanging around. But there's an eagerness, obviously, to get back to work. And I think people are trying to talk to health officials as much as possible to try to get a hold on when we may get back. And that's sort of what I'm hearing at this point, that early June would be, that's the goal.
I can imagine that scheduling is going to be a nightmare, especially with your stars. I mean, they're probably committed to other projects that are supposed to be shooting in June, July, August, you know? I mean,
yeah.
How is this going to work?
I don't know. I mean, like, it's such a crazy thing. I mean, right? Like, we have 3 amazing actors on Fargo from Italy. And, you know, we're like, okay, well, they have to get back to the show, right? So we have to, you know, things have to be right there, and we have to have a travel policy where they can come back to the show, right? And then all the stars and their schedules. I mean, one thing I can say that I feel about Fargo is that, I mean, we all love this show. I feel like all the actors do, and we, you know, we have, as it stood, we had about 3 weeks of filming left to complete the season, and I mean, everybody, we're this close, everybody wants to finish it, and I really think everybody's going to feel like that way on the other shows. There's sort of you know, you hear the speculation like, oh, are they just gonna, you know, maybe truncate the season and only air the episodes you have, or, you know, do a half season and maybe something later. But I think everybody's in it together, and it's just we're all just gonna hit the pause button, and then everybody's gonna get back to work, you know, and I think everybody's gonna finish the shows and movies they've been doing.
What have you been doing, you know, to stay creative, to stay active during this time?
Oh, well, I mean, one of the greatest things, I'm getting a lot of time with my son, who's almost 3. So that's getting more time than you know, obviously with all the travel than I've had in a while. And that's been incredible. So that's been a gift. And I think a lot of us are going to find that, oh, wow, like I'm getting all this amazing time with my family, and you know, I missed this, you know. So you know, I think that's going to be the first thing that's going to happen to all of us. And I'm seeing with my other friends in this business that are like, you know, wow, like, you know, I'm getting this amazing time. I got out of the city and went to upstate New York, and, you know, I've got my sons or my daughters or my kids, and like, we're just having all this amazing bonding time. I think the second part of it is, you know, early in my career, like, you know, you go through these periods when you're a freelancer, you're like, you know, you never think you're going to work again early on. Like, you get these breaks, and it's like, you know, you're working, you do a couple jobs you feel great about, and then you feel like you're never going to work again, and you might go a couple weeks or a month or something. And at some point early in my career, I realized that time that you have off is the time you grow the most. You know, sometimes when you just keep working and working and working, you almost kind of like get so into it and maybe even lose a little bit of perspective on your work. So, you know, I went back, and I've been sitting on Elia Kazan's book on directing forever, and I started reading that again. And you know, the Lighthouse has been sitting, you know, in my, you know, in my office forever, and I just picked it up, and I'm like, I'm finally gonna watch this film, and I'm gonna.
Did you love it?
Yeah, it's like, actually, I'm halfway through. My wife and I were watching yesterday, and we decided to watch the second half later tonight. So enjoying it, man. So yeah, it's great. And I love that, is just a tangent a little bit. I love that black and white 4:3 format. And I love Cold War, man. I mean, anybody who hasn't seen that film, and just the way they use that aspect ratio, and that's a film shot on Alexa that looks like it was shot on film as well. But anyway, yeah, I think like, you know, you don't want to waste this time, right? You want to spend this time with your family and like enrich your life, and we'll have a new perspective on things. But then you also, you know, there's that opportunity, like, oh, maybe I'll just go out and just take some pictures, and I'm going to watch a bunch of stuff. I'm going to review. I think reviewing your own work is one of the best ways you grow. You know, like if you're going to rebuild your website, you always kind of go through your work and your photos, and you're going to read, and then I'm noticing, like, Moish called me the other day, and we just had this great conversation, and you know, we're going to, I'm sure we're going to talk every couple of days, and, you know, we're going to talk about, when we go back to the show, what, you know, we're going to talk about life first, but then we're going to talk about, you know, like, yeah, maybe some things we might think about doing, you know, on the next round. And Dana said that about Noah Hawley, the creator of Fargo. He's like, man, you know what? Noah's going to take this time and look at everything, and he's just going to make everything better. So I think it's a great opportunity to grow, and as daunting as it like may seem financially, like we have to find a way to embrace it and say, man, I'm gonna watch a ton of stuff, read the books I've been wanting to, look at photos, go take pictures, and I'm gonna grow a lot.
Well, we're talking to Pete Konczal, cinematographer of Fargo, a whole bunch of other things as well. We're taking your questions on cinematography, so if you want to talk about lighting, camera, life, anything you want. We're focusing a lot right now just on kind of the effects of COVID-19 in production and ways to stay creative and active during this time. What are some of the ways that you are, I understand how you're using your time, family time, connecting with friends, all that. But is there anything you're doing to stay creative, maybe hone new skills, things that will make you better, smarter, all good things when you head back into production?
Yeah, I think it's like something I'm talking about. Like I think we're kind of reading it becomes a big thing for me. Like reading to get perspective from other filmmakers, right? So so just in and of itself, like working on Fargo is like, right. That's like, when you work on projects like this, it's like, like you're going for another master's degree or your doctorate or something. Like you just get so much better on this job, and the material is so good. So you're getting pushed by such great creatives like Dana or Noah, Enzo Maletti and Scott Wilson, the showrunners, Keith Jackson, who's incredible, Keith Gordon, who's our director on the last 2 episodes. So when I find that when you come out of a situation like that and you get a break, and then you kind of go back, you look at the work that you've done, and then you start reading, and even sometimes reading books again that you've read, and looking at films you like, you have a whole new perspective on it. You're like, oh God, wow, that's pretty amazing. Like I'm seeing that different now. And for me, that's the stuff, like in terms of honing my skills or getting better. That's that reviewing process and reading and whatever it may be, like reading about 1917 and like trying to figure out how they pulled that off, and I'm kind of a junkie for that stuff. So yeah,
I love that stuff too. Can't help it. That's what we talk about on Go Creative Show all the time. Yeah. I see a couple questions here about prep. People want to know how you prepare for your work. Zachary Taylor, great question. You do a ton of TV work. You do a ton of commercials, music videos. What are the differences as you're preparing for them?
Yeah, they're different. I mean, just inherent, like the language of both is so different, right? Like a commercial versus a narrative. I mean, I feel like when you can bring narrative to a commercial, it's always going to be great. And I think the most lasting commercials are that, but you just have less time to tell it in. And I find in the prep for commercials, you have so little time, and you don't always, but you often get bored. You kind of get agency bored. You get a director's breakdown, and in prepping, like you're often looking into it, like achieving things that have sort of been laid out for you. So, and that's not to like take anything away from that art form, because it really is great, but I find that I'm often thinking about shots, right? And you're thinking of like also big picture and how it's all going to come together. But there's specific things. There may be a product shot, or there may be a certain thing, with a car that's important to the client. And so, I feel like you're micromanaging. For me, the prep process is micromanaging a little bit more. And in narrative, you're really just ultimately thinking about telling the story. So I find the prep process to be much different, that you're thinking, in some ways, like, I'm just thinking about how to create a world and how things are going to exist, and like where I'd say really like what you're doing with the camera is so different in narrative, and just in the sense that like how am I really going to underscore this story where I put the camera? Like how are we going to do the coverage? How are we going to make something special and underlie the story with that? In a commercial, you're often looking for like a series of stunning images to sell a product. And again, you can put an arc to that. You can, there's people that I think are so brilliant in that world. But in the narrative world, I mean, you want to use the camera to tell a story. just even the sense that you can do a long shot, or you could do oneers. You could have a shot that could tell a scene in 5 minutes in a narrative piece of work, whereas in a commercial, in a 30-second spot, you're going to get seconds per shot, and then there may be an end page, and so it's I do find it's very, very different.
Yeah, I mean, looking at your Instagram page, and I suggest anybody following this for sure after we're done, scan through Pete's Instagram page, because you have absolutely stunning stills on here. But I do think that there's a consistency here in your images where you seem to embrace darkness quite a bit.
Yeah.
You've got a lot of dark cinematography in here. You have a lot of lights that are kind of in the frame. I'm scanning through now. You have, I wouldn't even necessarily say that. Well, they are practical lights.
Yeah.
But there's a lot of like fluorescent tubes that are visible.
Right.
You're really laying in that darkness. I love that style personally, and it seems like it's something you're really comfortable in. You like it a lot. I see it across a lot of your cinematography. Mm-hmm. Talk to us about what are the elements that really go into making dark cinematography work.
Man, that's so funny. Like, I feel like also to backtrack on that, I think I probably really delved deeper into shooting darker when I was on House of Cards. Like I up to that the year or so up to that, I had been doing a fair amount of commercial work, and then that wasn't as dark as that. And then I got on House of Cards, and I just saw an opportunity to light things darker, and I thought that the story was was very dark. The seasons I had worked on, especially season 4, where I just thought there was a lot of great things happening. So I kind of felt it was almost something that just sort of happened, and I never sort of like intended to be this sort of like this Prince of Darkness, but I found myself gravitating, which I think I've kind of become. I think it scares people. Like I'll get comments all the time. I'll go into like say a commercial job, and I'll get a comment of like, okay, well, you just can't be as dark as you were on that project, Rick. And we know you're dark. We know you shoot like that. In terms of where to be comfortable, I just always like riding the edge of exposure. Like when you can, I think there's there's something very natural about it too. Like the way our eyes don't always see everything. Like when we're in interior locations or darker locations, our eyes don't always see the way things when there's so many films where we got used to being overlit. But something just naturally started happening where I started lighting darker and really embracing it. And then once that happened, I just kind of kept descending into it. So yeah.
Well, I mean,
it's not a lot of comments about it. Yeah. And I'll get a lot of comments like, oh, don't you want to use fill light here? Don't you want to add something? And I'll just like, nah, I don't think so.
Well, all right. So clearly it's not just, underexposing things. There's a craft to it. There's a strategy to it. Just kind of walk us through the way that you will light a scene. So let just as a scenario, you want to have this kind of dark, creamy kind of look. Okay. The scene is maybe 2 people talking, simple. Right. They're sitting at a table, 2 people talking. How are you building your lighting plan? How are you framing to make that dark cinematography work? Because it's not just exposure; it's so much more.
Yeah, I mean, I think what you want to do, and again, like going back to, if anybody hasn't watched Mike Moyer's show with Ben, the Go Creative show, with so many great stuff that I'm going to borrow a little bit from Mike here, but you kind of just you look at the. I always look at the space and go like, what is the motivation for the light in here? So I never think of. I stopped thinking about lighting actors anymore. I lost that idea at some point. I was like, oh, just truly going to light spaces. So if the space is going to be dark and it's going to be interesting, I was like, how do we just create a world where there's darkness here, but you can still see things in the background, whether it's. I always use the term like, what are we going to anchor the frame with? If we're going to shoot something dark and we're going to make it work, we don't want it to just be like darkness for darkness sake. So I always think like, oh, is there something in the back of the room? There might be like a door cracked with something, coming out of there. Or where can I throw practicals around that feel natural, but that, it's just something that's kind of anchoring this person in this space. And then obviously just looking at the location itself and looking at what the opportunities for that, for that source is. And it's funny you use the word cream. That's a term, again, Mike Moyer used with me on the show, with the muslin stuff, we were lighting some night stuff and doing some lights through a window for a darker scene. And I was like, I just want there to be some like just living light in the space, like when a light comes in a room and it kind of bounces around and it's there. And so I'll often like just put stuff that's soft, whether it's a soft bounce in the ceiling or put muslin in the ceilings and just put a soft source through like a soft diffusion. And whether that's egg crated or whatever it may be, but it's just kind of like this low living light that's there. And for me personally, that's kind of where the magic of making that work is.
We got a question from Josh Hill, DP. Do you start with lighting the background and work your way forward towards the key light at the end? You sort of touched on that a little bit, but I am interested, especially because you had said that you've sort of given up on the idea of lighting the talent, which I think that sounds insane, but I know I love the idea of it.
It's kind of ridiculous. Yeah, there was a comment again, like one of the producers on House of Cards had come to me at one point, and the season I was working with Martin Algren. Martin's awesome, and yes. We were not. Neither one of us was ever pointing lights at people. We were using practicals and bouncing lights in this soft, soft things that existed in the location. So like say you have a window, right? Like you have two people in a room and they're sitting in two chairs in front of a window. I can use like the White House residence on House of Cards as an example. And yet it's a cloudy day and it's, we have like a trans light or something that has like a low level soft light. I'll think to myself, well, I just want to extend that light into the room, right? So that light's probably not enough exposure. It may not be enough exposure for the talent. So I may just think like, okay, I just want to carry that into the room. So that might just be something as simple as like, hanging some ultra bounce up or something and bouncing into that and just, just bringing that light forward. So in terms of I think to a certain degree, yeah, like if your light source, your key light's coming from outside but you still want to enhance it or build on it, you're still doing something to carry that forward. If that makes any sense. But, you know what I mean? Like it's always that, but it is really, truly that one source, or there could be a source coming out of another room. There could be light coming out of another room, like, and that somebody, walks into and the light from the window. But, yeah, I try to basically scan the whole location and go, okay, what's the motivation for everything? If the light's on in the kitchen and we want to do a little book light that's a soft light coming out of that kitchen, and if we want to extend that light from the window with something soft. But I think in those terms more in terms of like of key light. Yeah.
Mark Smith DP is asking about your use of negative fill. He says, do you use a lot of negative fill or do you just try to find locations with darker colored walls? Talk to me about that.
And then I'm seeing that Mike Moyer has a great comment here, so we'll talk about that too.
Yes.
Negative fill. Yeah, I still do use negative fill. And look, if you have a room with darker walls, it's going to help you. I mean, there's, we've all walked into a location where the rooms are pretty bright and you're thinking about doing something dramatic and you're like, oh, it's, we're going to have to, create the lights and we're going to have to use a lot of negative fill. And sometimes you'll just, you'll throw a lot of negative fill. You might just black out an entire wall that's white. Your grips might just, which is another great note too. Like when you're working on a show and you have a great team, your key grip will just come to you and start saying, I'm just going to, hey, I know you. I'm just going to start blacking out all those walls. I'm going to throw negative fill in the ceiling and I'm going to start, focusing that light. So yeah, I absolutely use negative fill and absolutely, when appropriate, looking for the, production designers to help out.
Mike Moish wants you to talk about the camera support systems. Now, when I was there in January in that episode, you guys were using the what's it called? I can't remember the name of that gimbal. The Ronin, yes.
Yeah.
So
that's a great,
that was fun to watch.
This is a great question. This is a great note from Moish. And this is something that Dana brought in, and that he and his camera operator, Mitch, I'll say the great Mitch Dubin, along with the great Mike Moyer and great Art Bartels and great Chris Wittenborn. So we're the Ronin goes on the dolly, and we do a lot with dance board. If we have a good floor, we don't even lay track, because it's a stabilized head, and the operator is working on wheels, in another location, and using the DJI Master wheels, and man, it's great. It's just it's funny, like when you walk on our sets, you're rarely going to see a camera operator sitting on the dolly. He's actually in another location, and the Ronins work so great that it'll go on a jib, and then we can fly that jib around, and that jib sometimes working in conjunction with track. We have this amazing dolly grip on the show. Mike Modi is probably just probably one of the greats ever, and so you have this amazing dance happening with him moving the camera on the dolly or jib or whatever it may be, and the Ronin head and the operator working off wheels, and it just frees you up so much, man. It is absolutely the way to work. I believe Eric on Mindhunter is using that same setup.
There's a couple questions here about kind of your color workflow. Rad AC is asking a question about your workflow on Fargo, and then we also have a question here about color contrast from Sweensy. So we'll stay on this topic for a couple of minutes. Talk to us about your color workflow.
All right,
so raw, LUTs.
Always a great question. I'm reading this here. So we are shooting raw, and we did create, Dana created with Ryan McGregor, our DIT on the show, who's also a super talented guy, this LUT to act like a film stock. I mean, you can get these LUTs too, for the Lexa or the LF or whatever it may be. I'm sure the Venice, any camera, any great DIT will be more than happy to build a LUT with you. And so right off the bat, we're building a LUT for contrast, how it's affecting dynamic range, how it's working with color. Fargo is definitely more saturated this year, and so as a base, yes, that stuff is all being worked out in beforehand. So once you sort of understand that LUT in the space you're working with, you're thinking about color. I mean, this is sort of another cliche, but and color comes down to everything from what lights you're using, right? So, and what color you like. I brought Dana showed me these mercury vapors he had, which are they used in the time that had this very very kind of like almost like nasty green, but beautifully nasty dirty green look, and so I love contrast of color. So I love mixing those with warmer lights or cooler lights or whatever it may be, but contrast of light and dark. And then those things are enhanced by your your costume designer and what they're doing. And again, there were certain things that Dana showed me in the Saul Leiter book and some of the other work where if somebody's wearing red in a scene that's there's a lot of neutral colors and you're working with a LUT like this and you're seeing how that color is being represented and it may underscore something about that character. That's just a whole nother amazing way to use color. And whether it's blue or green, and you're going to see it in Fargo in the season. I mean, and again, I'm just going to keep giving props to Dana and production designer Warren Allen Young and JT, our costume designer. I mean, it's everybody's working on that color palette, and we're trying to work on it with lighting and the color of the light as well.
We're talking with Pete Konczal. He's currently working on Fargo season 4. We only have like 8 minutes left before Instagram kicks us off. So we're going to blast through these questions because we've got a lot of them coming in now in the 11th hour. Where were you guys earlier? All right, let's see. We got this question here about how did your lighting change after the HDR and high quality of TVs and low light. So how are you adjusting your lighting now due to HDR?
Yeah, I'm sort of ignoring HDR, at least at this point. I mean, obviously we know that, you know, what HDR is, but I still like to, you know, light the same way I always have. I like to, you know, it's nice to know that you have some information in the darkness or maybe more detail on the highlights. And you know, I guess the best way to use that is when you're shooting, and it's like you say have a scene where it's like bright outside the window, and you'll kind of go into your raw and look at it and go, oh, I can pull detail out of that outside.
Yeah.
Or you look in your shadows like, man, I'm really dark on this scene, and I'm shooting, I'm shooting somebody, you know, wearing really dark clothes in a dark room, and then you're going in and going, well, you know what? I mean, I feel comfortable enough with HDR that I have enough detail there, so I'm pretty comfortable in this place. So
we've had a
yeah.
Go ahead.
But what I really like and I've always liked about filming is you know, when to use overexposure or underexposure to manipulate an image to make it look more interesting.
We've had a few guests on the show, on Go Creative Show, talking about HDR. Not many people are really making huge modifications for it. Like they just sort of like, it's there, it is what it is, but I'm just going to worry about, you know, what my eye is seeing at this moment. I mean,
yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah.
Are you seeing more HDR monitors on set?
No, I mean, we're still using we're still using Sony OLEDs. So so we're still working like that, and I'm sure in the color suite, it's really gonna we're really gonna see the advantage of like, oh wow, we have so much more information there, and like, you know, I might say, oh wow, it's way too dark on that scene, but I'm gonna get bailed out here because of HDR.
Yeah. Question from Josh Hill, DP. Do you find yourself working with higher foot candles when shooting low key scenes in order to avoid light contamination? Also, do you rate the ISO lower in low key scenes? So talk to us about how you approach low key scenes. Yeah,
I kind of don't approach them any different. I love the question about foot candles because I love working in foot candles, and
that's some real cinematography dork shit right there.
Well, yeah, it's really cool. Like Bob Driscoll, he was my gaffer on House of Cards, also another great guy. He would come over to me and say, you know, Pete, we've been working this whole season about somewhere between half a foot candle and 1.5 foot candles, and you know, it's so. I like to kind of be consistent with what foot candles are. It may change when you go outside in brighter scenes, but I do like to I think overall when you're thinking like whether your scenes are lighter or darker, you know, maybe your foot candles are in a range for your lighter scenes and they're somewhere in the darker scenes. But I like for darker scenes, I don't lower the ISO or pump more light, or I just you know, again, I try to, you know, ride the edge of darkness at those moments.
I love the theme here is edge of darkness with you.
Yeah.
A question from HRI Bar. What are your thoughts on RGB lights, or do you prefer gels?
That's a really cool question. You know, I mean, I like the ease of RGB lights. You know, Sky Panel is a great tool, although I often feel like they're harsh, and I still find myself like throwing muslin on them or bouncing them, or, you know, trying to beat them up to take the softness off, to take the harshness off them. You know, I think the color is good. There's certain ones that work a little better than others, and I mean, it's a great tool, and the ease and the speed of it's fantastic. That being said, I still love tungsten lights. I still like the quality of them. I remember, like, you know, hearing from Harris Avitas that he would, you know, go to a Home Depot and buy like cheap scoop lights and certain things and like make lights out of that, and, you know, just so they would have you know, there's a certain quality to a bulb, or to. We've been using Maxi Brutes and Park. Moish brought the Park can back to me on this job, and I feel like a Park can when you're on a stage can feel like a little pocket sun. And so as much as I like the LEDs and I like the ease of using the color with them, I'm still a sucker for tungsten lighting.
I love it. And that is the end of our interview with Pete Konczal, Director of Photography. So Pete, please tell us where to go to find out more about you, and maybe these unanswered questions they can ask you on Instagram. Where do they go?
Oh, yeah, you can just go to my Instagram page, which is my name. usually do try to get back to as many messages or questions I get. Other than that, yeah, that's probably the best way to reach me, really.
Pete Konczal, Konczal.
Great pronunciation.
There he is. There he is. And my name is Ben Consoli. I host the Go Creative Show podcast. And Pete will be on the Go Creative Show with Dana Gonzalez talking about Fargo sometime in April. So stay tuned for that. And I'm going to be continuing to do this series here on Instagram Live with cinematographers. So if you have any suggestions, let me know who you want to see on this little mini show here. So Pete, thank you so much for being our first interview, and a great one to boot.
All right. Thanks a lot, Ben.
Thank you guys so much for paying attention and showing up and asking your questions. I'll see you on the next one. Bye.
Thanks, Ben. Bye.